Good evening. How are you doing today? It's another day at Park, and today it's about boundaries. We're talking boundaries, we're talking structure. Now, remember, it's a month of behavior modification. How to modify your child's behavior without smacking, without yelling, without all those drama that we usually do. And I said this month, this one of the major tools we are going to be exploring is boundaries and structure. Because if we look at it, what we want is to modify behaviors and not necessarily to break the child, not to take revenge, not because we are angry. We just want these children to behave well. We want them to behave in alignment with our vision, in alignment with the big picture we have at the end of the day. And I also said that our modification must align with our vision. That way we are actually raising the children we want to see. And one of the most effective ways to modify behavior is boundaries, is structure. So what is a boundary? A boundary simply means the limits, drawing the limits in your child's behaviors. Now, defining where you want your child to stop when they are behaving. Now, the truth is, we already have boundaries. Yes, isn't that why we yell? Isn't that why we smack? Because we already know where we want them to stop. We already know what we want them not to do. So those are our boundaries. And because we have boundaries, we yell, we smack. Because when they cross our boundaries, that is when they misbehave. They are crossing our boundaries, and crossing those boundaries we are setting for them, the boundaries we are hoping that doesn't align with, or the boundaries that we hope that don't align with our parenting vision for them. When they cross the boundary, we want to stop them and redirect them to remain in the boundary. So we all already have a boundary. We already have parenting boundaries. But the truth is, these boundaries are not effective. If they were effective, we would not still be talking about behavior modification. Now, here's a big deal. It's not just about having boundaries, but putting plans in place to make sure the boundaries are followed. It's how children's behaviors get modified. And unfortunately, this plan is what a lot of parents do not have. And that's what we are talking about today. In the month of March, we are going to talk about effective plans to modify behaviors without all the dramas that are not really modifying the behaviors. Now, for your boundaries to modify behaviors, it must be consistent. Yes, it must be consistent. And one of the major reasons our boundaries are not consistent is because they do not define our values. It's because they are just some random boundaries we set. We are not consistent because they are just some random values we set. Boundaries we set out of impulse. Boundaries we set out of our mood. Boundaries we set just because we want to set boundaries. Boundaries we are not putting thought into. We are not thinking through. So the child is doing something and you are just saying stop, without even thinking it through if actually you want it to stop or why you want a child to stop. So these reasons are why our boundaries are not consistent. And remember, for your boundaries to modify behavior, it has to be consistent. And for your boundaries to be consistent, it has to reflect your values. It has to be not just an impulsive boundary. It has to be not just some random values and boundaries influenced by your mood, your pressure state, and all those external factors. Now, here's the truth. If your boundaries are based on your mood, your other external factors, impulse, and all of that, you are likely not going to be consistent. Yes, because you only say no when you're in the bad mood. You only say yes when you do not want your child to disturb you. It's like, let me give you a practical example. Someone who wants to set boundaries, television boundary, for example, and then your child and you have said, okay, no TV for so and so time, and this particular time you are doing chores or something, and your child is disturbing you, you just say, go and watch television. And because of that, you cannot completely set boundaries for television. You cannot completely set time for television because that time, that boundary you are trying to create for television is not influenced by your values. It's only influenced by external factor, the need for you to have some peace while at work. So for your boundaries to be consistent, you have to revisit your values. Revisit your personal values, revisit your values that will help you achieve your parenting vision and be certain of what you want. If you know that, okay, too much TV is not good for your child, it's not going to help you achieve your parenting vision at the end of the day, then you have to set a definite plan that you know that whether you are doing chores, you are busy, whatever you are doing, you will not allow your child TV time when it's not TV time. So again, revisit your value and make sure your value aligns with your parenting vision. And then you come back to create your values and you create your boundaries for your child. Okay, now to some of the factors you want to consider when setting your boundaries. One, is it realistic? Yes. When I treated understanding misbehaviors, it was one of the factors I referred to. One of the points I also explained on realistic expectations. Now, is your boundary realistic? Let's give a practical example. You want your child not to watch television, and your child is just 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, safe, and you have not taught your child how to get creative or what to do when he is bored. You have not allowed your child to understand what to do when you are bored, and then you want your child who is very active not to watch television. What do you want your child to be doing in that space of time that you are taking the television away? It's not realistic. So because your child is bored, your child wants to go and watch television, you are upset, you are angry, and you are reacting. No, it is not realistic. Another example would be you want your 2-year-old not to drink the juice that is for school tomorrow, and you put it where he can see, where she can see. Remember, children are moved by sight. Children are impulsive. They can't yet control their impulsive nature. You are not realistic. So some of those factors, you want to make sure that, hey, you are very realistic, age-wise, temperament-wise. And I always talk about child-proofing your environment. Like you leave things on ground for your little children and you don't want them to go near there. Hey, your child will go near there because they are curious. They want to know. They want to experiment. So some of these things, you are not being realistic. So because you are not being realistic, your child is still going to break that boundary, still going to keep going. Keep going. So before you set boundaries, you need to consider the age of your child. Okay, this is my child. This is the age. Can she really understand this thing? Can she really be able to control herself when it comes to this? You need to be realistic. One of the major another factor you want to consider, which is a very big one, is can you be consistent? It is important you know whether you can be consistent or not, because many times we are not able to be consistent, especially when a lot of environmental factors come in the way. You are tired. You know that when you get back from work in the evening by 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., you are tired. So, or you know that when your child gets back to work by 7, by 8, your child is tired, your child is feeling sleepy, and your child goes straight to sleep, and you want your child to bathe every night before bed. It is not, you can't be consistent. The day you will be too tired, you will not want, go and sleep. Go and sleep. You are not you can't be consistent because it's not realistic, so you cannot be consistent. Now, because you cannot be consistent, your child is not good. That behavior you want your child to learn, bathing every night, it's not going to work because you are not consistent. The same thing happens to little children. When they do something, sometimes you want to stop them. Don't do this. Tomorrow they do that thing and you let them get away with it. You are not consistent. And one of the reasons we are not consistent is because we are impulsive. We are not thinking. Like I said, we let our mood dictate the boundaries, what we want them to do or what we want them not to do. So when your mood dictates what you want them to do or what you don't want them to do, it's a simple thing. You are not being consistent. And because you cannot be consistent, your child that behavior is not going to be modified. Because they are going to push your limits, especially the strong-willed child. They are going to be like, okay, the other day my mom allowed me. Maybe he's going to allow me. Let me give you a practical example. My son, the other day, said he wanted a wristwatch. I should get him a wristwatch. And I told him, you have to earn your wristwatch because we use the token system in my house. I've talked about it, where I give them coins every day for positive behaviors. We have a list of behaviors. And when they meet it, by the end of the day, they get a coin because I don't give them pocket money yet. So I use token. So, and I told him, okay, and when they misbehave, also withdraw their tokens. That is it. Like the other day, Pearl deliberately spoiled Noel's item, something because she was angry. So she had to give Noel all her tokens to pay for it. Now she has learned. So he wanted a wristwatch, and I told him, no, you have to earn your wristwatch. You have to save up your tokens, trade it for money to buy your wristwatch. And he was whining. Why? Because in the past, I would buy him a wristwatch. When he asks for a wristwatch, I'll just say, okay, maybe when I go shopping, I'll buy the wristwatch. And I will do that. But now I am saying, no, you are 10. You need to be able to be responsible. And going by my family constitution, I am not obliged to give you all privileges. I'm obliged to give you needs, necessities. So any privilege you have to earn, I always tell them, luxury is a luxury. You work for it. You earn it. Take responsibility for your luxury, for your big taste and demands. So he was all whining. Why? Because in the past, I wasn't consistent. He wants something, okay, maybe something I will say, I'll not give you. Then later, when I go shopping, I buy it and I keep it and I give it to them. That lack of consistency. Now I have stood my ground and he knows that, hey, I'm standing my ground. I'm sure he's still hoping that along the line, I'll still change my mind. But I'm not ready to change my mind because I want him to understand that he has to earn his luxury. So another factor is you want to really make sure that boundary is actually going to modify a behavior, not just some random boundaries we just set out of impulse or not in the mood or something. Make sure it actually has a behavior to modify, because if it doesn't have a behavior to modify, then we are not going to be consistent. Yes, like your child asks you for something, you just say no without thinking. We do that a lot of the time. I would say I was a master of that until I became super intentional trying to modify behaviors. Your child just asks you for something, like my daughter just comes and says, and because that one, she can ask you for 101 things in a day. Mommy, can I take this old thing to use? And I'm saying no. We just have I'm saying no. So after saying no, I'm wondering, why did I say no to that? I'm not going to use it anymore. So why don't I just give it to her to explore, to do what she wants to do? And I'm saying no because I'm actually wanting her to minimize her coming forward all the time. Like, she can ask for something 1,000,001 times in a split second. But hey, my saying no to that doesn't really stop her from coming forward. Hey, no. Instead of it to stop her from coming forward, it's kind of, because she's kind of persevering. She's going to come back and ask me, Mommy, you don't use it, so why don't you want me to have it? And at that point, I don't have a genuine reason to give her, which doesn't make sense to her. So you want to make sure that your boundary actually modifies the behavior you want it to modify, and not some random boundaries that come from impulse or mood, which we always do. Impulse, you just answer without thinking. So to wrap up the boundary class today, I'll give you a worksheet as usual, and the worksheet has 3 columns. 1, the misbehavior column. Write these boundaries you want to set. Like I said, misbehaviors, children's misbehaviors are a way they test our boundaries. So what are those things that you feel are misbehaviors you want to set? I have been writing my own. Not necessarily misbehavior, they are just like things that make you want to like talk, yell, you want to smack, you want to correct the child. Those things you don't want the child to do. You may not even smack or yell because of them, but those things you don't want the child to do, those behaviors you want to correct in the child. So you write them out. I'm going to share mine too so that you have an idea. You write them out on one column. On the next column, you write why is it a misbehavior. You need to understand this. Now if you do not understand why it's a misbehavior, the truth of the matter is you are going to be random, impulsive about it. So you need to understand why is it a misbehavior. If my child is if I don't want my child to take drink 3 times a day, why don't I want my child to take drink 3 times a day? You need to be sure why that is. Then the last column is, can you be consistent with the reason? Can that reason be consistent? One of the ways to help you understand if that reason can be consistent is for you to take your mind back to the previous times you reacted, or the previous time you tried to modify that behavior, or the previous times you tried to stop your child from doing that thing, and ask yourself, have I been consistent? Have I always said no to these things? Have I always said yes to this thing? Or is just sometimes I say yes, sometimes I say no? So if sometimes you say yes and sometimes you say no, then you need to be sure it is actually something you want to modify. If it's not something you want to modify, then you may want to actually leave it and find another way around it. Find alternative or find another way, and don't create a structure or a boundary around it. So today's class is for you to identify those behaviors you want to modify, things you want to stop. You may not really yell about them, you may not really smack about them. You just feel okay, you don't want them, they are not right, or things generally you want to stop. Write them out and be very, very, very sure you want to stop them. Be very sure. Why do you want to stop them? Why is it a misbehavior? Be very sure you want to stop them. Now, because when you are very sure, that is when you cannot create a structure and be consistent. Because, hey, the truth of the matter is, for you to modify behavior, you need to be consistent. For you to modify behavior, you need to be consistent. And for you to be consistent, you need to be very sure that this is what you want and this is not what you want. And not that at some point you want this, at some other point you do not want this. No, you need to be very sure that at every point you would want this. At no point do I want my child to talk to me rudely. That is it. At no point do I want my child to go into the kitchen and take a meat from my pot of soup or something. That is it. At no point do I want my child to wake up in the morning and the first thing he does is to go and watch television. That is it. At no point do I want my child to leave his chores undone and be playing. That is it. And also you need to be sure it's something you will want consistently. Okay, so that's that about today. Please do your task. You can post it here, you can send it to me privately, you can choose not to send it to me. It's okay, you can just choose to work on it and have it. But the truth of the matter is, you can listen to me, join classes, but it takes commitment. It takes you taking action to be able to keep going. Commitment and taking action for you to actually get results. Like I've always said, if you're not committed to it, if you're not taking actions, then you are not going to get results. So write down those behaviors and be very sure that you actually want to modify them. And I said one of the ways you can be sure you want to modify them, look at back from now, the previous times those you have reacted to those behaviors. Have you always reacted to those behaviors? Or sometimes you react, sometimes you do not react. Thank you for today. So when tomorrow, send your questions tomorrow and we'll talk about it. Remember, tomorrow is our clarity and question day. So send your questions tomorrow and we'll talk about the questions. And then on Wednesday, we go further about the second aspect of creating boundaries, which is find out on Wednesday.